How many of you all have done notebooks with your robotics club already? Okay, good, good. So, well, I hope out of what I present today that you get one or two things that you actually can grab on and use in your own clubs. It's going to be a long day, and I thought I might start off a little bit on a kind of light note, so I might start with a little bit of a joke. What do you think?
That's a good one.
Yeah. Spurs season is coming, so how about a Spurs joke? So as you know, Kobe Bryant is one of our favorite basketball players in San Antonio, right? Well, years have passed, and the greats are passing on to the great beyond. And Kobe Bryant, finally his time comes, and he goes to the gates of St. Peter. And St. Peter, welcome, Kobe. We've got a place for you right over here. And it's this kind of modest little house. And Kobe's kind of used to living in a big mansion, but he thought, this is heaven, this is okay. And he begins to kind of notice that up the hill there's this really nice house. And out in front it's got this flagpole and the Spurs flag flying on it. And there are Spurs flags and banners and stuff on the windows. And he thinks he spots up there Tim Duncan walking around. And he goes back to St. Peter and he says, man, what's the deal? Tim Duncan's got that big house and I've got this little shack. St. Peter says, that's not Tim Duncan's house. That's God's house. Okay, well, so let me, got a little packet for you of stuff. Sure. Oops. Two, three, four. Here you go. So part of what I was kind of charged with was to talk about the connection between your notebooking and the higher order thinking skills, the HOTS. So if I can ask someone, can I impose on you to read that left passage, what are higher order thinking skills?
Sure. Higher order thinking skills include critical, logical, reflective, metacognitive, and creative thinking. They are activated when individuals encounter unfamiliar problems, uncertainties, questions, or dilemmas. Successful applications of the skills result in explanations, decisions, performances, and products that are valid within the context of available knowledge and experience, and that promote continued growth in these and other intellectual skills.
Okay, so it's a lot of big words there. But I think wouldn't you say what you all are having your kids do in robotics clubs, engaging in robotics, is really pressing them to do a lot of these higher order thinking skills. All the time they're presented with some kind of problem. They've got to figure out how to solve that. And they're learning things in that kind of context of this, getting that robot to work, right? So I think this is what you all are doing with your kids all the time in these clubs. And it's really exciting because it's very active learning. And so how about, can I get someone, maybe you, to read the next passage about why have students write?
Why have students write? Writing stimulates active reasoning. There is a direct relationship between the formation of concepts and the rigors of expressing them in words. Writing requires students to impose discipline on their thoughts by asking students to form and shape their thinking. When students use notebooks as an integral part of their science studies, they think critically about their thinking. This reflective thinking can be encouraged by notebook entries that present opportunities for students to plan, develop, and test their ideas and understanding. Notebooks also offer powerful opportunities for self-assessment, which motivates students to rethink and restate their scientific understanding. Revising their notebook entries helps students clarify their understanding of the science concepts under investigation.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, there's a connection between expressing and representing our thinking and really the kind of development of that thinking. And somehow when we put it down into words, it becomes something we can look at and kind of analyze and it takes some kind of shape, and we can reshape our thinking then through what's on the page. So it's very powerful, and I think that I'm going to be presenting you with kind of probably too much theoretical stuff, and I'm sorry, it's kind of my way of doing things. But if you don't get anything else out, that the idea there that the notebooks can be used to help your students plan what they're doing, to develop their ideas or what they're doing, and then to test it. And you can do all kinds of different notebooking activities that center around those activities. So what I'd like you to do right now is to get a sheet of paper out, and I'd like you to scribble down probably 5 things that you, if you want to do it on the back or something like that, or whatever, if you have some paper, 5 things that you are hoping your students to learn through the robotics club and participation in it. What are the 5 kind of learning goals, the concepts you're trying to teach with your clubs? Great. Well, I would say that the things that you've written down, I think each of y'all, you may collaborate with people for your club or run your own club, but these kind of things that you have as chief goals for your club and your students, I think you can tie into whatever you're doing with a notebook. So I don't necessarily have like a packaged notebook for you. I've got a link to one that you could buy if you want, and it's a robotics notebook. But I think you're going to find your own way to use it with your group and your club for your particular kind of goals. So that's my approach to it. On the page 2, I'm kind of modeling off science notebooks, and again, you don't have to do this with your notebook, but most science notebooks have got a kind of a certain format to them, and typically they will leave a number of pages empty for a table of contents, 3 pages to 10 pages. They'll have a title. They'll ask the students to date each entry in the upper left and number pages, and try to keep it neat and organized. And this is just one kind of rubric and stuff for a science notebook if it's being graded. I don't know if you all are grading because it's a club, but probably not. But I do have 2 other sites that are in the resource list that are from the FOSS-Web that gives an example of a science notebook for elementary and a science notebook for middle school, and it kind of shows how they lay out the notebook there if you want to make your notebook have that kind of formal structure to it. So I'm going to introduce 3 frameworks for as you kind of think about designing writing activities with the notebooks. And the first one is connected to the promoting higher order thinking skills. And this is from an article that is also linked that's about higher order thinking skills. And it's a little overwhelming, so don't be too overwhelmed by it, because I'll try to kind of gloss it and fit it in. But they talk about the different levels and the kind of base level of building content and contextual knowledge and a disposition, and then linking the linking stuff, the bridging stuff is not as clear to me, but it seems like connecting with prior learning and building some structure for what they're doing. But what's kind of interesting to me is looking at the higher order thinking, the kind of interplay between situations, skills, and outcomes. So if you think about situations as that problem that they're facing, and the skills are, okay, well, what sort of, you mentioned concepts that they may apply from their science class, or critical thinking skills or strategies will they bring to bear on that problem, and then what will the outcomes be? So this kind of movement between a situation or context to some sort of application of something to address it, and then paying attention to outcomes. I think that that's a really interesting kind of framework. I want to look particularly, though, back down at the bottom level, which is where you may have to spend a decent amount of time which is building some subject and area content knowledge. And particularly, you may need to work on things like vocabulary. So I do have an activity related to building the vocabulary. So if you go to page 6, so in your club, you may need to have them work on certain terms and concepts that you want them to know. And specific vocabulary instruction impacts heavily on student achievement. In one school district, 2,400 terms have been identified that middle school students need to know in order to be successful in their content areas that are instructed. Just a whole lot. And knowledge of any topic is encapsulated in the terms the students knows that are relevant to the topic. So you may be building or wanting to build a certain vocabulary that your students are using. And you may want to be explicit about trying to build that vocabulary. Well, you can use the notebook to do some of that. And there's 2 little activities you can come up with your own, but one of them actually comes from, do you remember Goodnight Moon? The Margaret Weiss Brown? This is a book that she wrote about. So, how to do important thing about entries. It's a 1-page entry on the notebook, usually a paragraph. And students will start their entry with the important thing about blank is, and they follow that with some details. And I think it's powerful if you ask them or encourage them to make some comparisons because it connects to their previous knowledge or their funds of knowledge, if you want to call it that, especially if it's a kind of new term. And finally, it concludes with the same idea it had in the first sentence. So I've got an example there on the word simple machines. So the important thing about simple machines is that they get the work done for you in an easier way. A wedge is like a doorstop, and it makes things, it pushes things apart. The wheel and axle make things turn like the middle of a pencil sharpener. An incline can help you move something heavy up like a wheelchair ramp. But the important thing about simple machines is that they are the easiest way to get things done. So another way to do it is a little bit more formal, if you want to say that it has a kind of template, but at the bottom one, it's the important term entry, and you write the term out or the concept, and then ask them to describe it in their own words and define it in their own words, and even ask them to draw it, if that's relevant or important. And notice on the right, it's got a little area where you could ask them to write or kind of give their own assessment of their understanding of that term. So you could look at it and see where they think they are in understanding that term, the simple machines. We're going to do one right now, and let me see. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3. There we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to do the important thing about entry. Do y'all want these 2? Okay, you'll have to write though. So you see how I've kind of got it laid out with the sort of type of entry it is, and then the date and the term. Let's go ahead and do the term trial and error. And if you want to also look at the page 6, just to remind yourself how this entry works, but you'll say the important thing about trial and error is, and then give us some details about trial and error, and then it's got that ending where you end again, where you repeat the same idea, the important thing about is. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do this important idea entry. Yeah, very good. Very good. So, do you think this might be useful building concepts with them, get them to write something. And so kind of back to the handout, that big thing, the higher order thinking skills, which is so intimidating. Well, you do a lot of trial and error type stuff with your robotics clubs, right? And you may want them to, in a sense, kind of go through that thinking of what's the situation, what sort of skills am I going to apply to this, and then what's the outcome going to be. So you can also kind of design some writing that they do around their testing of their robots. And let's see what page I've got on that. So let's look on page 3. And I'll kind of get to that before, during, after framework. But at the bottom there, it's got the SSOs, I'll call them, situation, skills, outcomes. And I thought a couple of sort of possible types of entries you could have is problem, cause, solution. What's the problem? Our robot keeps breaking down. What's the cause of the problem? And then solution. What's the possible solutions? Now, another kind of similar thing to that is maybe some thinking or writing related to trial and error. So is there writing some things about before they're going to try what they're going to do with their robot? What's the goal or what's being tested? Okay, we want this robot to get to the end of the whatever without stopping. Whatever that is. What will or should happen? Get them to try to list what they're predicting, even if with trial and error, this time I want it to turn right, at this point, right? That's the kind of thing that they do. So if they can articulate the kind of things that they're programming and planning for the robot to do, then observations, what happened. We've got a double entry notebook. Are y'all familiar with double entry notebooks? They're very flexible and very powerful. Where's my notebook? So you can do them a couple different ways. You can just have them divide the page, and then what's on the two sides can be all kinds of things. Okay, this is what we predict will happen. Okay, they list the sequence maybe of where their robot will go the whole way through its sort of plan. And then here's the observations about what really happened. Or, I had all kinds of ideas of things that would go on either side, but what they're planning, they could list things, and then as they do the designing, the design feature and the rationale why. I made the wheels really big, so they've got some flexibility with size of wheels and things like that. The back wheels are huge, and the axle's really short. Well, okay, that's a design feature. Then on the other side, they might write why they did it that way and what they maybe expect to have happen. So they're really flexible, the two sides. It can be a dialogue also between the student and you. The teacher can come and dialogue, or the student and other people in the group. It kind of gets two sides of things. It's very flexible with what you can do. I've got a double entry notebook for kind of before, during, and after type of entry that's on here. So you see, I've kind of got it almost like a Cornell notes, if you know Cornell notes. But on the top is the regular kind of information about the kind of entry. And then on the left is their predictions of what will happen, their kind of plan. If they can list down their plan, whatever it might be. And then on the right will be their place for observations about what really happened. So they run the program, they run the robot with what it's doing, and they take notes and observe. So they get to practice some of those observational, note-taking type skills. And then, why did it happen? You know, what happened? I'm sorry, what happened and then why did it happen? So if their robot sort of breaks down at a certain point and they've recorded it, why do they think it broke down at that point? You know, is it, I know it's that point in the, they're actually programming these, is that right? Yeah, so it's got to be that programming at line 10 or whatever. So I think given time I was going to have us practice this, but I don't think we quite have time because I want to present a little bit more and then give you all some chance to kind of talk with each other and share ideas. But does this look like it's a possible kind of notebook entry that you could use? I've got, if we kind of go back, designing some prompts that connect to the promoting higher order thinking. The other framework I've got, and you may or may not be familiar with this, you could try to design things that relate to the engineering design process, because that's really what you're teaching in a sense with these kids with the robotics class. They're little engineers. So that whole sequence of defining a problem, specifying requirements or background research, brainstorming solutions, choosing best solutions, doing development work, building prototypes, testing and redesign. You can try to design things in the notebook that connect in that process at different points. And then the other framework I've got is the before, during, and after. So entries could be geared towards certain times in their work in that design process. Entries designed to record and promote invention and brainstorming, so get them to write out their design specifications. Diagram their, they could draw a drawing of their robot and then diagram the different features. Their building process, or the prototype development, creating the sequence that maybe they're going to have the robot do, and articulating the sort of what will happen. I think entry types, you can have them write various kinds of lists or sequences. But during, this is the kind of type entries that are connected to while they're working on the robot, in the middle of, it's being tested. Record results, the follow a predicted sequence, noting performance of the robot. And then after would be kind of connecting more to the, in the outcomes part of the higher order thinking, and some of the sort of perhaps kind of reflective type things they might do, processing results, troubleshooting problems, formulating redesigned solutions, for the next trial. And I've got on page 7 at least a little bit of some kind of things for prompting this debriefing, you might say. This could be at the end of your day. You've spent all day working on the robots, or you're kind of, not all day, but you've got like an hour or two with them, right, for the clubs. You could have them write in their journal, what went right today, or what was the best part of what happened with your robot today, or what went wrong, or why do you think we had a problem with that? Write a short plan to avoid having this problem again. What did you learn today? What questions do you have? And I've got just a little kind of sample sequence there that so the reflective type, type of entry would be a reflection. Write about what went right today, what went wrong. And one of the things about having them kind of write something that's a little bit more reflective, where they're kind of stepping back and looking at what they've done, is that it does give them that perspective that they might not have otherwise if they don't take that time. But reflection becomes also very powerful when you ask them to tap into their feelings, because their feelings are really important, their emotional connection to what they're doing. And this can be a place where they can sort of vent and express some of those feelings as connected to what they're working on. And that I think is very powerful too. So let's see what else I've got. The other thing I wanted to show you is sort of a smorgasbord. This is the Science Notebook entry types. And this is from a website called sciencenotebooks.org, and it's just taken directly from there. But it's a group in the state of Washington, and they did a kind of a project where they were studying the use of these notebooks in classrooms, and they found there were 8 types of entries. And what's kind of neat about this website is you can go to it and you can click at the different types of entries, and they give you screenshots of actual student notebook entries at different grade levels. So like for drawings, you could see drawings of a science notebook from a 9th grader or a 3rd grader. But drawings, tables, charts, and graphs, some kind of graphic organizer. Maybe you want to chart out your plan for developing this robot. Let's get the whole agenda. Notes and practice problems, reflective and analytic entries, inserts. So those are kind of things, I don't know if you use, sometimes people use notepad, little sticky notes and foldables and things, and you can also other artifacts, investigation forums, writing frames. So what I'd like you to do right now is to, either with a partner or on your own, try to list down some ways that you would like to use the notebook with your club. And we're going to have about a little over 10 minutes for doing that, and then we'll share some concrete ideas for the sort of notebooking that you either plan to do or you're getting some ideas for doing right here. Okay? And then we'll come together and share these ideas. All right? Very cool. The one piece I feel like as I was putting this together, I didn't feel like I had a good handle on. And when my son was in robotics, I saw that was kind of a big thing that was problematic, was how they're working together as teams and a group, and how the notebook might tie into that. And I'm not sure. We were just sort of talking over here, and I was speculating that one of the things I observed, at least in my son's group, which kind of fell apart at competition. I wasn't there at their regular club meetings, but boy, teams and group work kind of falls apart when people don't participate and it gets all on one person's shoulders, and then there's resentment and people yell and stuff like that. And I wonder if the notebook can be a thing that gets everyone in the group engaged with an activity. So like everyone has to observe what happens during that test, and everyone has to write what they think went wrong. And then they have a group powwow with their conclusions. So I'm just speculating, but I felt like it's the one piece I didn't really feel like I had a good thing to offer you today, but I'm sure you deal with it all the time. Well, I think that's all that I've got for you today. I actually have to run back to my classroom at SAC, and we're teaching Antigone. So, but thank you for letting me have a little time to speak with you. Have a great day, and good luck with your clubs. So have fun.